Welcome to the Two Beans in a Pod. So are we living in a simulation? It sounds like science fiction, but what if the movie The Matrix wasn't that far off?
That's exactly the question we're tackling today.
We're doing a deep dive into the laser DMT experiment, specifically looking at what independent researcher Danny Goler's experiments seem to show.
Exactly. And our mission really is for you, the learner.
Yeah.
We know you want to understand this whole code of reality phenomenon.
It's very controversial.
Extremely. So we're going to explore the claims Goler makes, but also, and this is critical, the huge counter-arguments from neuroscience and optics.
Right. We want to give you the clearest picture of what this strange experience might reveal, and just as important, what it probably doesn't prove.
Mm-hmm.
And hey, if you find this whole exploration into the fabric of reality fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe. That way you won't miss our next deep dive. Okay, let's unpack this. The core claim is it's just mind-bending, that humans can somehow access the boundary of our reality.
Right. And the person at the center of this is Danny Goler. He's an independent researcher, a filmmaker.
And his background isn't what you expect. Not a physicist in a lab coat. He's a martial artist, was an American Ninja Warrior finalist,
And I think that background is actually pretty important. He's coming at this from a philosophical place.
The hard problem of consciousness.
Exactly. He's asking, what if we could use a radical neurochemical key to change our sensory input and, see the underlying structure of it all?
And that key is NN, dimethyltryptamine, DMT.
So Goler's protocol, he calls it the discovery. It's like a combination lock.
How so?
You have to ingest this really potent psychedelic while at the same time looking at a projected refracted laser light.
A specific kind of light.
Yeah.
Coherent light.
And that coherence is absolutely crucial. We'll circle back to that when we get to the scientific pushback.
Okay, so from the subject's point of view, what happens?
Well, the results are apparently immediate and just stunning. People report seeing what Goler calls a self-executing code.
Like alien writing hidden in the world.
Mm-hmm. And this isn't your typical psychedelic visuals, melting walls or colorful patterns.
No, this is way more organized, more structured, almost technical.
That's the word. Subjects claim their visual field turns into these dynamic arrays of numbers. Sometimes they even see XYZ coordinates running across a surface.
And people with a computer science background, they see something even more specific, right?
Yeah, and this is where it gets really interesting, but also where you see a bit of cultural bias maybe creeping in.
Okay.
They describe seeing things they call shaders. And they compare them to computational structures like C++ arrays or Python lists literally running in front of them.
So it's that technical language, that shared lexicon that Goler uses as evidence that it's an objective thing they're all seeing.
Precisely. But here's the real kicker. The thing that, for him, separates this from any old hallucination.
The space permanence.
Complete space permanence. That's the key phrase.
Okay, break that down for us. If I'm hallucinating and I move my eyes, the hallucination moves with my vision, right? It's internal.
It's tied to your optic nerve, your processing centers. It's part of your frame of reference. But with this experiment, subjects report something completely different.
That the code stays put.
It stays fixed in space, external to them. The analogy they use is like shining a flashlight on a wall in a dark room. You can move the beam, but the wall doesn't move.
So the laser is the flashlight, and this code is the wall. It's an external object they're just illuminating.
That's the claim. And you can see why that's so powerful for someone experiencing it. It feels objective. It feels like you've discovered something that was already there.
And it's not just one or two people.
No. Goler claims thousands of replications. He says somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 subjects.
And they're all seeing this universal signature.
A shared neurovisual signature, yeah. They often describe it as looking like Japanese or maybe Hebrew letters, these strange, consistent glyphs.
So if you accept that premise, that the code is external and fixed, it immediately plugs into a much bigger idea.
The simulation hypothesis.
The Matrix.
It's the Matrix analogy made real. Goler's whole premise is that this experiment is basically a glitch, an exploit. It lets you peek behind the curtain and see the boundary to our simulation.
And we have to talk about the DMT state itself, because that's the engine driving this whole experience.
Right. People who do it consistently say it feels more real than this.
More real than baseline reality.
It's an enormous, instantaneous jump in detail, color, dimensionality. It's like Neo waking up one level higher.
And suddenly realizing that our world, this one, was the dream. Or at least the lower res version.
Exactly. When you feel you've accessed a realm with that much more complexity, it almost validates the idea that our reality is just a contained subset.
And it's important we're talking about N and DMT here, not 5-MeO.
A critical distinction. 5-MeO is the God molecule. It's more about total self-dissolution, a feeling of oneness.
Less visual.
Much less content-driven. NN-DMT is the one that's highly visual, that delivers what seems like structured information. It delivers data.
Which is perfect for a simulation theory revelation.
It's the perfect vehicle. So Goler's conclusion within his framework is pretty logical.
That the computational world is the real world.
Right. And our physical reality is just a program running inside a much, much larger computational space, maybe run by some advanced civilization.
But this whole thing, this whole incredible idea, it hinges on one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Is that visual evidence actually real and external?
And that's where we have to pivot. Because the counter-arguments from hard science, they are very, very strong.
So what do optics and neuroscience have to say about all this?
Well, mainstream science basically sees this as a fascinating but entirely explainable mix of known effects.
No simulation required.
No simulation required. It's an intersection of neurobiology and optical artifacts.
Okay, so what is the primary optical artifact they point to?
It comes down to the light source itself, the coherent laser. The visual effect described is overwhelmingly consistent with something called the laser speckle effect, LSE.
Laser speckle effect. I've seen that. Is it grainy, shimmery pattern you see when a laser pointer hits a wall?
That's it, exactly. You get LSE anytime coherent light hits a rough or diffusive surface. And you have to remember, the retina inside your own eye is a diffusive surface.
Oh, interesting. So the code isn't something being illuminated out there. It's a pattern created by the light itself scattering inside your eye.
It's an interference pattern. Coherent light waves are all lined up, they hit a rough surface, they scatter, travel slightly different paths to your eye, and they interfere with each other. Some waves cancel out, some double up.
And that creates a super high contrast, granular, twinkling pattern.
It looks incredibly complex and detailed because it is a complex interference pattern. But it originates from the physics of light scattering, not from some external code written into reality.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense optically. So the brain gets this very detailed, very strange new input, the LSE pattern. What does the DMT do that makes the brain interpret that as code?
That's the neuroscience piece. DMT causes a profound dysregulation of your higher level cognitive function.
It takes the filters off.
In a way, yes. The technical term is that it reduces the brain's precision weighting of priors.
Okay, let's unpack that. Priors are like my brain's expectations based on past experience.
Exactly. Your brain is a prediction machine. It uses past experience to decide what things are and to stabilize reality. You see a shadow, your brain's priors help you decide if it's a coat rack or a person.
And DMT messes with that process.
It turns the dial way down on those expectations. The top-down stabilizing structure just sort of collapses.
So you have a brain that's highly activated, its normal rule book is gone, and then you feed it this incredibly detailed but ultimately random LSE pattern.
Precisely. And the brain, lacking its usual filters, goes into extreme pattern marching mode. It's a phenomenon called pareidolia.
Seeing faces in clouds.
Seeing faces in clouds, but on steroids. It gets this granular speckle pattern, and instead of dismissing it as noise, it desperately tries to find order. It interprets the complexity as symbols, as writing, as code.
And that's where expectation bias comes in.
Huge. If you've been reading about simulation theory, if you've seen The Matrix, if someone tells you that you might see C++ arrays,
your brain is primed to find exactly that in the noise.
It seizes on the ambiguity and interprets it using the concepts you've already loaded into your head. The symbols look Japanese or like coordinates because those are pre-existing concepts, not because they're objectively there.
But what about the space permanence? That's the toughest part of the claim. The feeling that it's fixed in space.
That is the trickiest part, psychologically. But even LSE can create a perception of stability, especially if the light source is stable and the pattern is complex enough. Beyond that, when the brain's filters are off, the internal projection can be so vivid, so overwhelming, that the feeling of externality is just part of the hallucination.
It feels fixed because the internal creation is just that powerful.
It could be. The brain is creating a reality so convincing that it includes the property of externalness.
Goler's team did try to test for this, right, with magnets.
They did. It was a pretty basic test. The idea was, if this code is computational and external, maybe a powerful magnetic field could interfere with it.
Distort it somehow.
Right. But they reported no fundamental change in the code at all, which, strongly supports the idea that it's an internal neuroperceptual thing.
So it's not interacting with physical forces in a measurable way.
Exactly. There was an anecdote about one person maybe guessing where a magnet was, but overall the test failed to show any external manipulation. For the code to be real, you'd need to be able to detect it with something other than a person's consciousness.
Okay, this brings us to a really critical point, the safety and the methodology here.
Yes,
Yeah.
this is hugely important. There are significant issues with both research integrity and, frankly, public safety.
We really have to stress this. People should not be trying this at home. What are the actual risks?
Well, physically, you have the very real risk of retinal damage from messing with unsupervised high-power lasers. And psychologically, you're using a Schedule I substance without any kind of screening or support. That carries a risk of acute psychosis.
And scientifically, the experiment itself is leaky.
Very. There's no standardization, no rigorous specs for the laser's wavelength, its power, the diffusion material. It's basically impossible to replicate in a proper scientific setting.
You'd need a double-blind, placebo-controlled setup.
Absolutely. And most importantly, you'd need a negative control.
What would that look like?
You'd run the exact same protocol, same drug, same setup, but you'd swap the coherent laser light for an incoherent light source.
Like an LED.
An LED, a diffuse light bulb, something like that. If people still see the exact same code with incoherent light, it proves the effect is just the drug and the expectation. It has nothing to do with the special properties of the laser.
And without that comparison, the claim just doesn't hold up scientifically.
It remains completely unsubstantiated. Now, to be fair, Goler's group has tried to create a framework to standardize this, the DMT laser interference protocol.
So an attempt to gather more structured data.
Right. It's a step towards structure, even if the data ultimately disproves the original hypothesis. The intent to be more rigorous is there.
So to sum up, we have this incredible claim of visual proof of a simulation. And on the other hand, we have really strong scientific evidence that points to an intersection of neurochemistry, expectation, and a known optical effect.
The laser speckle effect. And if we accept the scientific view for a moment, if this whole structured, complex visual world is generated internally, it leaves us with an even bigger question.
About consciousness itself.
Right. What does it say about the fundamental computational power of the human brain? If it can take a minimal, noisy input and construct a shared, detailed, alternate reality that feels more real than this one.
Then maybe the biggest mystery isn't whether we're in a simulation.
But what kind of operating system is running inside our own skulls that can build a universe of code from just a little bit of light and expectation?
That is a much more profound mystery.
It forces you to redefine what our own minds are capable of creating.
An incredible thought to leave everyone with. If you want us to deep dive into similar topics, please hit that like button and subscribe to Two Beans in a Pod. Thank you for listening to Two Beans in a Pod.